Continuing our coverage of the biggest, most embarrassing, most dangerous national security breach in modern American history, it would be woefully incomplete without the input of two very important people. One is former State Secretary Hillary Clinton, who was pilloried by the right for her mishandling of classified information. She's weighed in on this, and we're going to get her reaction, but also the reaction of my friend and yours, the host of the 1 million plus subscriber political commentary show, Luke Beasley of, yes, you've heard it, the Luke Beasley Show. What's up, Luke?
Oh my goodness! It never feels any worse. Your introductions, Josiah.
I appreciate that, man. Listen, we got to hype you up, especially when you consider the grave circumstances that we're actually talking about, which are quite serious. But we got to pull up this Hillary Clinton tweet because there's a bit of levity here. So can we go ahead and pull this up? This is huge. Okay, folks. President Clinton's wife, the former First Lady, the Secretary of State under President Obama, the nominee for the 2016 Democratic nomination to be president, Hillary Clinton, responded to the recent scandal about how the Trump administration, top cabinet officials, accidentally leaked top secret war plans to a member of the press. Well, she responded with an eyeball emoji and said, "You have got to be kidding me." Now, listen, I understand to some people are like, well, that was just a few words. But Luke, isn't there a lot packed into that?
Oh, there's so much packed in. The second that this story broke, I was desperately wanting to see what Hillary Clinton was going to say, because I think we can all acknowledge, it's not that she didn't do anything wrong. It's that they went so overboard in their reaction. It was everything on Fox News for so long. I know we're going to get to in this segment. Even mainstream media, how they covered it and how they covered it versus this. And for so many people, on one of the things I'm doing on my show today is just going through one example after another of Fox hosts and Trump officials and right-wingers of all different sorts reacting. And all of them now, they don't have a huge problem with a private server being used, and then something that Hillary didn't do, leaking it to a journalist on accident because you so carelessly added the wrong person to a group chat. They don't seem too upset about this all of a sudden, those same people. But Hillary Clinton is having probably some schadenfreude, but also some rage.
No, I mean, listen, it's richly deserved. Again, as you all know, during the 2016 presidential campaign, there was so much scandal about Hillary Clinton's emails, and whether or not she either purposefully or just simply through negligence and carelessness mishandled, state secrets, state emails, classified emails that, I think it was 113 emails out of thousands upon thousands upon thousands that were sent to a private server. And this was the political anchor around her when she first competed against Donald Trump. And most political experts agreed that between it and the FBI announcing in the 11th hour that they were reopening an investigation, or had reopened an investigation into Hillary Clinton, before deciding ultimately that they couldn't bring charges against her because they didn't have proof of willful misconduct, that was what ultimately destroyed her campaign and allowed Donald Trump to become president in the first place. And by any objective standard, this scandal with top Trump cabinet officials is just objectively worse by every which way. But since Luke teed it up so well, we do need to look at a compilation compiled very thoughtfully by CNN's Caitlin Collins about what prominent MAGA Fox hosts and Republicans and people on the right had to say about Hillary Clinton.
If there was anyone other than Hillary Clinton, they would be in jail right now.
Nobody is above the law, not even Hillary Clinton, even though she thinks she is. Mishandling classified information is still a violation of the Espionage Act.
When you have the Clinton emails, on top of the fact that the sitting president of the United States admitted he had documents in his garage, they didn't prosecute, they didn't go after these folks.
So, I mean, quite frankly, no, it's fine. I mean, just quite frankly, we could probably be here if you wanted to gather every time a Republican or right-wing pundit did the butter emails thing, we'd be here for what? It'd be like a 48-hour stream nonstop of us just playing footage. I mean, Luke, do you think they know, or do you think they've forgotten, or do you think there's like a oh yeah, we're totally violating our standards, but we're just hoping that the press continues to grade us on a curve. What do you think's going on here?
You know, I don't know what some of them are genuinely thinking, but I think if any of them were honest, they'd have to come to terms with the fact that they either were doing faux outrage about the Hillary stuff, or are lying about how seriously they genuinely believe privately this to be in terms of it being a scandal. But I think, okay, you and I have talked about how with hypocrisy, people so often in politics just don't care, especially within the MAGA cohort. And it gives them this twisted super strength where they can just do whatever, bend their principles in every which way, however they like, whenever they like, just to do whatever is most politically advantageous. Because sometimes what is right and what is in line with your principles won't be the most politically advantageous talking point. And so we who try to hold ourselves to one standard on things are kind of boxed in by that. And I'd rather be boxed in and be honest than dishonest, but they can just completely change their stances on things. And the audience, which is important here, won't care. And so then they can keep doing it. But this, because it's so brazen, my hope is, at least for some, will be seen as, okay, maybe when Josiah and Luke say that Republicans are held to a very different standard than Democrats, maybe they're onto something there.
No, I mean, listen, the evidence is insurmountable. As a matter of fact, I want to, there's a really good op-ed, if you can pull it up, by Philip Bump of the Washington Post. And we don't have to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs here because it really just emphasizes what's going on. So it begins with, readers above a certain age, say 30, will recall that a central reason Hillary Clinton's 2016 for the presidency failed was that she used a private email account and private email server during her tenure as Secretary of State under President Obama. This story constituted an enormous segment of the endless run-up to the election itself, an offshoot of the Republican effort to sabotage her electoral chances by suggesting that the September 11, 2012 attacks in Benghazi were somehow a function of her incompetence. A Benghazi-focused probe revealed the server, and the server then spent years generating repetitive news stories about Hillary Clinton's handling of secure or classified information while serving in the cabinet. This is a big one. In September 2015, Gallup asked Americans what words they'd heard most about the leading candidates for president the following year. The most common response about Trump, the eventual Republican nominee, was immigration. The most common response about Clinton was emails. And again, we'll just stop right there for just a second. Do you already see the asymmetry at play? Because Trump was campaigning on a ruthless immigration policy, and he wanted to. So the word that Americans were associating with Trump is exactly the word that Trump wanted associated with him. But with Hillary Clinton, do you think she wanted the word email to be associated with her, knowing that it was a scandal, however fake, however fueled by faux outrage? No. So you even see it right there, reflected in what the American people perceived. With Trump, they associated a word with him that Trump wanted. With Hillary Clinton, they associated with her a word that was absolutely political poison. So just continue just a little bit on this article. The scale of the coverage was unquestionably inflated in that Clinton had far fewer dubious actions or comments worth exploring than did Trump. That's not to say that the use of a private account and private server were entirely unproblematic. They did introduce risks that shouldn't have otherwise existed. It is instead to say that the coverage was more extensive than was warranted, in part because the media was belatedly adapting its existing approach to the new surreal nature of Trump's candidacy. There was another reason that the Clinton email story stayed in the news, the reason that ultimately may be why she lost. There were months of incremental developments that triggered new attention. The emails themselves were released in tranches, with reporters rushing to find anything that might be of interest to readers, however legitimately interesting. The Justice Department, still under the authority of the president Clinton once served, investigated whether Clinton's server broke the law. That led to a July 2016 announcement that the department wouldn't seek charges, to a mini-scandal about Bill Clinton talking to the Attorney General, and ultimately to a last-minute announcement from FBI Director James Comey that the email probe was being reopened right before the election. That announcement may have been what put Trump over the top. In other words, Trump may have been elected president the first time because of putative questions about national security hygiene. And again, we won't read the rest of the article, but you can see where it goes from here. Philip Bump is setting up the standard that Hillary Clinton was held to. And he goes on to make the case of what's happening here. And it just is. It's just worse because Donald Trump's top cabinet officials, multiple, you have the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, you have the Director of National Intelligence, you have the Secretary of Commerce, you have the White House Chief of Staff, ostensibly the second most powerful person in Washington, all on this app. And the National Security Advisor accidentally adds somebody who's not vetted or authorized to have this information onto the Signal chat. This is, I mean, Hillary Clinton didn't CC, an Atlantic journalist or New York Times reporter in these so-called classified emails. This is just objectively worse. And my fear, Luke, before I turn it back over to you, my fear is that between the media and quite frankly, even elected Democrats, that they won't make this the scandal it is in substance and in merit. What do you say?
We talk a lot about this. Right-wing media is going to do what right-wing media is going to do. Okay, so we can all expect that they're not going to give the outrage to this that they gave to Hillary's, or that just imagine if this happened during the Biden administration. Fox News would be so giddy, it would be disturbing, and would be covering it nonstop. But that's what we'd expect from them. The thing that really pushes our politics off the deep end is the fact that the quote unquote liberal mainstream outlets also fall into this double standard that since you and I, Josiah, have been collabing, has been at the epicenter of our discussions. And it's that it's amazing the ability that Trump officials, that the right wing media has to sort of drive what the narrative should be. And for some reasons, I guess it could be partly less willingness to be as overtly political or brazen, but Democrats and left-leaning commentators in mainstream media just really don't seem comfortable trying to drive a narrative, but they'll respond to them. And so that often sets up Trump. You referenced that really interesting survey of people, of the words they associate, because Trump was repeating immigration over and over, and then everyone would respond to it. And then he was repeating emails over and over, and everyone would respond to it in a way that Hillary's attacks against Trump wouldn't get that same air across the spectrum. You then had an outcome that was so advantageous to Trump. And so I don't, systemically, it's kind of a tough thing to understand how this would be corrected, but at least we can do our part to bring it up. The other tough thing is Trump benefits from the flood the zone approach that Bannon laid out and that Trump definitely abides by, which is you do so much and you're so outrageous all the time that people get numb to it. And it's sometimes an impossibility to cover everything with the time that it deserves because we can't be up more than, however many hours per day. And there's so much going on all the time. So I'm sure that I'll end up moving on from this quicker than maybe it deserves because of the next scandal that's going to hit tomorrow.
Yeah, it's really tough. I know that we're at a disadvantage, I think, inherently. I just hope that Democrats in particular, and quite frankly, responsible journalists, don't play into it further still. I'm a believer that the substance of this is just objectively worse than anything about Emailgate or whatever, but it won't get that sort of natural attention and national attention unless Democrats push aggressively to give it that attention. Facts don't speak for themselves. They never have, they never will. And so elected Democrats have an obligation to really make the Republicans pay a political price for this. That will not happen organically. And I'll also note, because I just did a segment on this, Donald Trump, earlier this morning, there was speculation about whether he would fire National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and instead, he says he'll stand by him, that he's not going to get fired. Now, that could change tomorrow, let's be clear. But this also indicates that Trump feels like he won't pay a political price, or that Republicans won't pay a political price on this objectively terrible scandal. And that's also something which should invigorate Democrats to take this more seriously. Oh, crap, he's not, they don't feel any pressure about this whatsoever. But yeah, we'll definitely be covering this and following the updates. Luke, where can people find you?
They can find me at Luke Beasley on YouTube. Josiah, great as always to be with you.
Yeah, thank you for covering this with me. And again, just keep your head on a swivel because I'm sure the updates about this are going to be really interesting.